Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 27th episode of the Startup Boston podcast, where I interview entrepreneurs, investors, and influencers in the Boston startup community to uncover actionable advice and stories from their experiences. I'm your host, Nick Dupuy. First, a big thank you today to Ellen Chiesa, who you can listen to in episode 19 for introducing me to today's guest. Today's guest is Doug Morgan, the Director of Engineering at Lola Travel. Doug joined Lola when the company he co-founded, called HopOn, was acquired by Lola. Lola Travel is Paul English's second travel company and connects travelers with in-house personal travel consultants who help you plan, book, and manage your travel, allowing you to have a more personalized and rewarding trip. In today's episode, a few things Doug talks about are what the process was like for him personally to be acquired, including what the decision process was like, what the transition was like to go from founder to employee, what the key is to successfully build out an engineering team, and the biggest lessons he took away from SurveyMonkey and HopOn that he's been able to apply at Lola. If you like today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes so you can get all the new episodes as soon as they're released right on your podcast app. And as always, you can find today's show notes at startupbostonpodcast.com, and you can reach me at nic@startupbostonpodcast.com. Enjoy today's episode. Doug Morgan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I want to talk a bit about what it was like for you to sell your other company and then now be working as an employee. But first, can you give us some background about yourself and from what you were doing before Lola?
Yeah, so I went to school at Georgia Tech, computer science degree, ended up in the Silicon Valley, first worked for Adobe for a little while, then joined SurveyMonkey pretty early on in their sort of reimagining of a company. SurveyMonkey was founded in 1999, but Dave Goldberg, I believe it was Spectrum and Bain, bought out the founder in 2009, moved the headquarters down to Palo Alto, California. I joined engineer number 3-4 there, worked up pretty quickly, tech lead engineering manager, stayed there about 3.5 years. Left to start my own company, HopOn, which we'll get into. Lola bought HopOn sort of last summer, early fall, and I've been here ever since.
Why did you start HopOn? Let's start with HopOn first. What was that problem you were trying to solve there?
Yeah, so I'd always wanted to start a company. My mom is a big entrepreneur. She did a lot of tech companies in the Baltimore area. So I grew up in Columbia, Maryland. I think at the time I actually wasn't really looking to start a company at SurveyMonkey. I was actually just promote engineering manager. I was running the iOS team. I actually was really enjoying my job. Sort of out of the blue, a friend of mine made an introduction to my co-founder, Jade. And, he had moved up from LA. He started a previous tech company that was successful at an exit, moved up from LA to San Francisco. And he's looking to start a company. He's looking to find technical co-founder. And so I met him. We talked about this idea he had for HopOn. It's funny, at the time, all your college friends are getting married, right? Just everyone's getting married. There's bachelor parties. And I've been going all these trips and trying to manage the coordination of everybody going everywhere. It's the email chains from hell. It was just awful. And so, his plan was like, okay, let's do group travel. I'm like, okay, God, of course, group travel. A lot of startups do that, but a lot of them fail. And so sort of the interesting take on this was no one really goes the extra mile to say, okay, let's go book everything too. Because booking travel is there's a lot of bureaucratic things you have to go through. You have to raise some money because you need bonds. There's a bunch of integrations. You need a GDS deal. There's a lot of bureaucratic stuff. And the theory was, well, if we could go the extra mile and search, plan, book, do all the management of the entire trip, and we can package this in a mobile-first friendly way that, I can be on my phone, receive an invite from my friend via HopOn. It has a flight, hotel, activity, a shared expense, and then hit the book button, and I'm instantly going with him, and it's all booked and ticketed. Oh. That's the awesome, magical experience. And we actually did deliver that experience. We built an iOS, a mobile web, and a desktop application that allowed an organizer essentially to plan a whole trip. We made something called like a trip list, which is sort of bucket for an itinerary. You can then plan it, book it yourself, 2 taps, done, or then invite all your friends, coworkers, etc. They receive an actual bookable copy of that thing. They can then turn around and book it.
So they could just go on and hit book rather than having to follow all the steps you follow to go into those different websites and book the flight and book the hotel and all that other stuff.
That's exactly right. And if you had a previous HopOn account and you had set a home airport, what we'd actually do, if it wasn't the same as where you're coming from, we'd intelligently try to pick, I'm flying from San Francisco, my friend's flying from San Jose, and we're going to Vegas. Well, let's try to find the best flight from San Jose that maps to get around the same time for around the same price, etc. We try to actually do intelligent sort of matching for these itineraries.
Yeah.
We also, offer some features on top of that, like if you had a hotel room, maybe you buy a suite, for example. Well, what you actually want is get paid back. So you actually can flip this little switch we call shared expense. So as opposed to when you hit the book button, your friend did, they actually pay you back and not book a room.
I like that. I could use this right now because I'm booking a ski trip and it's like the same sort of process.
I think everybody, whenever I tell everybody this idea, they're like, oh shit, I could use that right now. That's awesome. Sorry, no longer around, but you know.
Do you think that those other barriers to entry that you mentioned before, those integrations and things that you needed in order to do the booking, actually kind of in the long run made it easier for you to be successful because there wasn't much for competition?
Well, it turns on a level of success, right? We are here now. We're not, the $1 billion startup unicorn. I like a lot of engineers, a lot of startup founders say they travel. Like everybody travels. Like you go on vacations and you're like, why don't I make a travel app? That should be easy, right? And everyone sort of thinks this. What ends up happening is you do quickly get into the sense of, oh, wow, like, there are some, Expedia has this affiliate network, which allows easy booking of hotels. But then really getting beyond that, like a simple hotel integration, it's really hard to get all the necessary steps in line. Like to ticket airfare in the United States, you have to be certified at the Airline Reporting Corporation. I think myself and my co-founder, we had to give our 2 years of tax returns. We had to put up a $20,000 bond. You have to literally have a safe in your office. They come and do an in-person interview. I'm shit you not. This is actually what happens. And yeah, I mean, that's a high bar, but you could do that if you have the time and the energy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just a nightmare when you get into this industry, when you like the whole, how the sausage is made. Sausage, when you make it, it's like, wow, this kind of sucks. But the end result is very good if you can manage it because you really can own the customer experience. And for us, that was incredibly important that we didn't want people like having a deep link to leave our site. We wanted to be the one app on your phone where you can book and plan everything.
When did you start HopOn and when did you sell it?
We started HopOn sort of September, October 2013. The acquisition was it was announced in October 2015.
So were you looking to get acquired or were you looking to grow?
So at the time we were trying to raise an A. So we had raised backing up, we had raised about $1 million from NEA and a bunch of angels. As part of that process, one of our angels introduced us to Paul English. And sort of at the time, we didn't know that he had starting Lola, a travel company. So when we talked to him, I think it became very quickly apparent to him and Bill and Dennis here and the tech team here that this would be something that was interesting because we wrote the entire backend in Python. I built a big part of that, all Python backend. Lola here, we're all a Python company. So there's a lot of synergies. We started a new travel company. We had this backend component that was a search and book and payment component. They're like, oh, we can just grab that, have it for Lola. And that's what happened. So all part of HopOn's infrastructure still lives today at Lola. So back to the question about did I want to? I mean, I think every startup going in, the number one thing is most of them fail. And aside from failure, you either have the route of an acquisition, which is either an actual acquisition, an acquire hire, or, you actually make it big and you have the IPO. I don't think we went and said, we want to be acquired, right? Or, acquire post, pre-series A. I think we said, the unicorn, right? Everyone wants to be, the show of Silicon Valley. Everyone wants to do that, right? But just not the reality. That's not how life works. So we're trying to raise the A. That was going so. So that's why we were asking for advice for Paul for sort of where to go, how to go about the approach. And they made an offer when we came out to visit. So that's sort of how that went down.
What was it like for you to find out that he wanted to buy your company?
There's definitely like an oh shit moment, like, wow, holy shit, this might actually work out. That was probably how I felt the moment. And then afterwards, there is all the paperwork, all the due diligence. So I'm like, oh, God, I need to get the cap table. I need to get all the paperwork. Oh, there's lawyers. The lawyers take a long time. It's surprising how much lawyers take to get stuff done. But yeah, it was definitely at the time, it was awesome when that was going down. And it's nice. So at the time when this went down, there were 5 of us at HopOn, myself, my co-founder, 3 employees. Paul said, we're welcome to come, but he had to move from San Francisco to Boston. So one of my employees actually did come with me, which is awesome. So he was able to come along, and it was great to be able to return some money to investors, right? And so it's always great to be able to do that because they are the ones who really take the biggest risk, right? I mean, like I said, most startups fail, so being able to give some money back is great.
Was it a tough decision to make, or did you know right away that you wanted to do it once you got the offer?
I wouldn't say it was tough because it was probably like the right decision to make at the time. It's hard when you have, an offer sitting in front of you versus an uncertain future. You have to decide whether you want to take the risk, right? And based on how things were going, this would probably made the most sense. We did think about it. My co-founder and I, we discussed other options, but ultimately, like, this was the best option. So it was tough more in the sense of letting go, as it were. It's your baby. I spent a lot of time over the previous 2 years working on this. So it's more tough, I'd say, in that regards than anything else.
But some of it still lives on today, right?
Some of it does still live on today. There are references in our code base. HopOn does still exist in random places, sometimes surprisingly in random places that you find, but it's fine. It's good.
What advice would you give to someone who has received an offer for their company and they're not sure what they should do?
Every situation is different because it's so different. Like, so we had some investors, right? And some of them big investors like NEA, and some of them were small. They're angel investors like friends and family. And in a case like that, for us, it became hard because like if you have the ability to allow, your friends and family. I mean, no offense to NEA, they're a big portfolio, they're a big company, right? So like we're dropping the bucket to them, but it's really hard to say not give friends and family a return on their investment. You really have to be able to balance like, one, are you passionate about it? Like, and I think we were, but also you have to balance like the actual risk reward of the future. Like, do you think you can continue doing this viably moving forward? And for us, travel is hard, and travel is really hard to raise in if you aren't doing something very sort of orthogonal to traditional travel medium. And so we were sort of very similar, like a DIY travel product. I mean, Airbnb, Uber, they're travel, quote unquote, but they're so different than everything else that for them, it was essentially a lot easier to raise money. But you're saying, oh, look, we're going to compete against Expedia and Priceline. Investors are like, good luck with that. I mean, those companies have billions of dollars that they spend in user acquisition. So like, what special knob are you going to turn? And we actually did have some special knobs, which were interesting to the extent by which we were going to be able to confidently raise and continue the company we were unsure about. And so that's sort of how you have to balance, in my mind, how you look at it if you have an acquisition offer in front of you.
What were some of your special knobs?
So for HopOn, we said, we're not going to beat these people in SEM or whatever. So we're not going to do that. So we're not even going to try. I mean, I think we tried a couple of small tests with Google AdWords, Facebook ads, etc. But what we said is our hypothesis, which we sort of prove, is that, if we can get the organizer or the person who invites someone, if they book, how many people do they invite who book? Like sort of a virality score. And our virality count was above 2. So every person who booked something, they would invite 2 people who booked, which is incredible, right? So, which is great. So that was sort of the special knob that we were tuning, but there is still the gotcha of getting that first person. Mm-hmm. And so how does that sort of spread down the chain? And so investors were like, wow, that's awesome, but you still have to be able to acquire the first user. And so we were sort of working through how we're going to acquire the first user and working with our investors and doing a marketing plan while we were trying to sort of raise at the same time. And that's sort of, how we ended up here. That was essentially our special sort of knob.
So the key, it seems like the key to your growth was making it really easy and simple to have other people book once it's shared to them.
Yeah, like our magical experience was, you could connect. We encourage you to use Facebook as a way to sign up, and we also allow you to link a Gmail account. But you make a trip. There's a big invite button. You hit it, and you're like, oh, look, there's Joe and Bob. And you hit boom, boom, invite. They get an email. It'd have the Doug invited you to this trip. And you see the whole itinerary. You're like, join this trip. And you click it, opens right into the app, download the app or mobile website. And then there's a big book button just sitting there and with everything. And then that was the great experience that people were like, love that. It's funny. We did some user tests on usertesting.com, and we'd have some people who were like, oh God, that's so cool. Like some stuff like that.
That's awesome. So what was it like for you to go, the transition to go from a founder back to an employee?
It's tough. I will not lie. I have some friends. I work at SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey bought Wufoo when I was working there, and the Campbell brothers and Kevin Hale, who now a partner at YC, they had to do the transition too. And I think it was hard for them too. It's, you go from running and being in charge of everything to just suddenly not, that you have to be okay with your little portion of the pie. It's tough. I think for me, what helped mitigate it a lot was, I have a 18-month-old daughter, which is awesome. And I've been able to, take that time and spend spending time with her and being home with the family, which has really helped a lot in that regard. Because prior to when HopOn, when you have family, which is, my wife was very, very supportive of it and was all on board, but, family time can be hard. So I've personally been able to mitigate it with that. But, I will almost certainly start another company again someday. I just really like doing that.
So you've recruited and built out teams for SurveyMonkey, HopOn, and now Lola. What's the key to successfully building out an engineering team?
I think keeping the bar incredibly high. I think you cannot sacrifice on the quality of engineers you hire. As soon as you start saying, God, well, I really need an iOS engineer, but I'm not finding anybody I really like, let's just hire this guy that was okay. As soon as you fall down that rabbit hole, it's bad. It's really hard to dig out of it. I try to keep the bar personally as high as I possibly can at SurveyMonkey and HopOn at Lola. We try to hire the best we can get. I also think it's culture is really important. I mean, you're working with these people 40 plus hours a week. And if you don't like working with them or they don't like working with each other, it's just not going to work. Like you're going to have to move people around or you have to get rid of someone. And getting rid of someone's even worse. It's better to just not hire someone than to hire the wrong person, right? So yeah, that's my two biggest takeaways of just keeping the bar really high and making sure they are a good fit for your specific culture.
What's the difference between, or what's the biggest difference between engineering at HopOn and engineering at Lola?
I would say HopOn, we had 3 engineers and we were in a co-working space and we had to be super scrappy. So I would say, we probably cut some more corners. We shipped some more half-baked features, but, we were just trying to get things out there as fast as possible just for user validation and just because we had some bugs. So we had half-baked products. But, that was the right move for us given that fact that we were small and hadn't raised a lot of money, so we didn't have many engineers, right? At Lola, we've had a nice, as I sit around and look at the office, I'm like, we have a nice big office and we have a lot more engineers. So what's nice about that is you can really take your time to sit there and say, okay, more fully think out, how should the product work? Can we architect this correctly? Can we really, have good test coverage? And can we do the right things with development and staging, a production environment? We only had one environment at HopOn. It was production. So when you ship something and we had a continuous integration deployment pipeline, there was no testing. Like if you test on your local machine, it went straight to production. That resulted in some bugs occasionally, as you'd expect. But for things like that, you can really have a much more well thought out engineering structure in place.
What's the most important thing that you've learned since joining Lola?
Great question. And I think it sort of goes back to going from a founder to a non-founder. And I sort of think this is sort of takeaway from the last many years is I really cared about everything all the time. Like when anything at all the company went negative or bad or et cetera, or was good. And you really have to learn how to focus on just what is in front of you, what your team is doing. I love to say that the company's not important or anything, but there's a reason everybody's employed, right? They have their own responsibilities and roles at a company, and they have to execute their part of the company. And I think as soon as you get into the whole of like, oh, but why is this team doing it that way? You could spend hours and days trying to really dig into it, then you're not doing your own job. So I think I've really learned how to try to be much more focused and just sort of guiding my team in the direction that makes sense.
So going from that founder role of kind of having an eye on everything and then going back towards just focusing on what...
It's that too. I also think sort of when I was young and more naive, even at SurveyMonkey, I was like, oh, God, I'm the 24-year-old, 25-year-old smart engineer. Like, I therefore know everything. So why are we doing it this way? And it's just, there's always information you don't know. And, that you can't think that way. Like, you have to have what's in front of you. And you really just got to crush it. But when you're the founder, yeah, everything's in front of you. So in some respects, you're doing everything. That's sort of one of the best things I've learned since being here is really try to focus on your one area and just try to crush it.
So both HopOn and Lola are in the travel space. So what is it that attracts you to travel?
I don't think I went into HopOn saying I wanted to work in travel. I think I said, oh, I like a lot of people like, oh, I travel and this is a pain point in my life. And I think I was trying to solve more of something that was painful to me than necessarily what had to do with travel. And so solving a pain point in my life is something I really enjoy doing because I'm solving that pain. That's how I went into it. And I think in general, this sort of thing happens to a lot of people. They want to solve pain in their life. Well, a lot of the pain can be travel related because people travel, right? And there's always travel is good and bad, right? Travel can be a great experience or your flight can be delayed and canceled and your hotel be awful. And so people have very strong opinions on either side of the house. So people say, oh, I can make travel better. And that's sort of what attracts a lot of people to travel specifically. But I would say in my case, it was more coincidental than I necessarily wanted to work in travel.
I want to move now into our rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what do you miss most about San Francisco?
My friends, number one. But besides my friends, definitely the beer and the wine. My wife and I were frequent Napa visitors. Napa, Sonoma, Alexander Valley. Also a huge beer nerd. It's funny. I actually was my CTO here. He signed me up. I was quoted in the Boston Globe in a beer snob article.
I saw that.
Yeah. So we'd hit a Russian River Brewing Company in Lagunitas and Bay Republic. We were members. When we were young and no kids, we'd be members of 3 or 4 wine clubs. We'd go there once a month. It was great. So I miss that a lot.
So what are some of your favorite Boston beers?
Oh, great question. Trillium is right down the street from our office. And so we have like 3 or 4 growlers here. So before we got the kegerator at the office, we'd go down there and fill it up. They have some really good double dry hopped pale ales down there. I really like them. I had one. I really liked Harpoon's. I think it was a secret alloy ale. I got that recently. I enjoyed that substantially. And I love Jack Abbey's Hoppiness Union lager.
What surprised you most about Boston?
When you are on public transit in San Francisco, Caltrain, MARTA, you can look around and you can see a lot of people are in software. They're like shorts and sandals, they have a t-shirt on. And I get on the T here, I'm like, people wear nice clothes. What is this? Like, people, well, essentially like, they're actual industry, like a lot of people in finance and a lot of other industries here. So I'm like, oh, people wear suits? People do that? And so that was the thing that was harming the most. I was like, wow, there's actually it seemed like there's much more of a diverse set of like things here as opposed to not just, oh, everyone works in software. Everyone's at a startup in San Francisco, right? That's what it felt like. And it's actually kind of nice to not be in the everybody's in software bubble that, exists in San Francisco.
What's your favorite place you visited and where do you want to go next?
Favorite place I visited is probably split in 2. Portland, Oregon for beer, because that was awesome. But I think wife and I went to Australia, and that was just awesome. So we did Sydney, we did Cairns, Uluru, Kangaroo Island, and that was awesome. So we really enjoyed our Australia trip.
Australia is one of my favorite places. I've been there.
It's so great. We went to the Great Barrier Reef, went diving. It was just incredible. Oh, next on the list is Italy. My wife and I's 2 favorite thing are like Italian food and pizza and red wine. So,
That's the place to go.
That is apparently the place to go if you like those 2 things.
What's another startup in Boston you're most excited about?
Totally self-serving, but drafted. And I say drafted because recruiting is so critical and so hard, even in the Silicon Valley and here. It's often who you know and who you've worked with. Recruiters are great, but they can sort of be a crutch. Like, your network and the people the people you can leverage to find like the right people for your company is the best way I've found to recruit employees ever. And so Drafted's, mission is to do this, right? Like it's all referrals based on people who know, like see your job and they can refer other people. I think that crush and execute on that would be amazing. Number 2 would be Drizly, just because I use it to buy alcohol.
Vinayak has been on the podcast before. What's something about you that most people don't know?
When I was in high school, I was on a show called It's Academic. Do you know what this is?
No.
I don't know. Maybe it's a Maryland or Mid-Atlantic thing, but it's literally a quiz show. It's on like public access television, and there's like teams of 3 like high school people that sort of compete in like this. I don't even know what the style of the show is, but you get questions and you have to like ring in. You did a buzzer, you got to ring in, you got to answer a question, but it's like in high school. So it was actually on TV.
I've never heard of it, but I'll have to look it up.
I'm sure there's an archive somewhere that you could find me. I think I answer I always like the sports guy, so there's like one question that I was able to answer.
If I could find it, I'll have to put a link to it in the show notes.
Oh no.
What are your favorite tools that help make your work and life easier?
Fitbit. I love my Fitbit. I use that got the scale, got the Fitbit, try to, the one of the heart rate monitor. I try to use that wear all the time for everything. I just think quantitative self, knowing, what you're doing is the best way to measure it. Slack. I not only work Slack, I have a family Slack too. So we actually Slack each other. Actually turns out to be awesome. You have like little channels, you can talk about stuff. And actually it's really great. God, those are my two biggest tools that I use.
Do you have any favorite blogs or books?
Favorite blogs, First Round Review. I like Both Sides of the Table, another blog by Mark Suster. Mm-hmm. I think he makes a lot of really great points. Books, sort of this is fiction, but I recently read it's the Atlantis Gene. It's sort of like a sci-fi trilogy about genetics, epigenetics. I thought it was very fascinating. It was actually written by, I think, a former software engineer who started trying to write. And so okay. I just recently read that. I thought that was awesome. It's like a trilogy, so it's 3 books.
I'll have to check it. I've been trying to read more fiction because I mainly read nonfiction,
Yeah, so I read a lot of. I actually try to read mostly fiction because I deal with the nonfiction crap every day at work, right? I really, I'm always on, Hacker News and trying to do stuff at work. It's nice to sort of like when I have free time, which is very infrequent, to sort of like go somewhere else.
Yeah, I just read Altered Carbon. Have you read that?
No, I've not.
It takes place in the future, and it's when you can like download your consciousness. And then, so essentially, if you're wealthy enough, you never die.
Oh, interesting.
And you can if you're wealthy enough, you can have clones of yourself. Otherwise, if you don't have clones, you then go into, they call them sleeves, but it's really just like other people's bodies once they're dead.
Oh.
And they download your consciousness into it. It's really interesting.
Fascinating.
Look, it's good. Last rapid fire question. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Patience. When I was young, always wanted to like get shit done as fast as possible. And like I said earlier, like didn't know why people were doing stuff. I thought they were making wrong decisions, and just be patient. Like, take a step back, examine the situation. That's the number one thing is patience. I was definitely a very rambunctious, impatient person when I was young.
It's not all going to come crumbling down.
No, it's not. It's all going to be fine. Be patient. Like, the world is not going to end. The only advice I would give, I guess to sort of startup founders is the things that I found that were the best is a support network. And so when I did HopOn, my wife was great. She's very supportive, but she was also working, had health insurance for the two of us, which was awesome, which is like those things that makes, that you need in life, like money and health insurance, like generally speaking, are great. But even if you can't have that, just like people that you will always be on your side no matter what was incredibly important, and so you could vent to, because you're gonna vent a lot when you're a startup founder. Shit happens. There's the highs and the lows. It's a big roller coaster. And sort of the general advice is to have fun. I'm a pretty laid back, jovial, self-deprecating person. I like to have fun. I feel like business is great, but it's you have to have fun while you're doing this.
Just a few final questions here to close out. First one is, where can people find out more about Lola Travel?
Our website, lolatravel.com, and our iOS app in the App Store.
Where can people connect with you online?
Best is probably Twitter. My handle is Dougzor, Z-O-R.
And last question, do you have any parting thoughts, advice, or suggestions for the audience?
Yeah, have fun. I see a lot of people take this way too seriously, like just business and startups and life. Like, have fun, everybody. Like, you only do this once, and if you don't have fun, it sucks.
We'll end there. Doug, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You'll get all my new episodes as soon as they're released right on your podcast app. And if you really liked today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you could write a review of the podcast as well. Just go to startupbostonpodcast.com/iTunes. And remember, you can find all show notes with links at startupbostonpodcast.com. Until next time, if you have any feedback, ideas for guests, or just want to say hi, you can reach me at nic@startupbostonpodcast.com or reach out on Twitter at startupbosscast. That's startup BOS cast. Cheers.